Patch 15.6 has been out for a few days and huge changes have shaken up the meta. Hey guys, it's me Kupo, and in this video we're gonna go over the best comps so you could continue to climb LP in this patch. The first comp that we're gonna go over in this video is Janna Veteran. This is probably the most OP busted comp of the patch, so if you're able to spam any comp, you're probably gonna want to spam this one. So this comp is a level 6 reroll comp where we want to get Kobuko 3-star and Janna 3-star. Now the reason why this comp is so OP is because Janna's power-up Veteran got changed from being a secondary power-up to a primary power-up, which means it's really easy to force this comp. Now this power-up Veteran did get a small damage nerf, but there was a small buff to Udyr and a pretty big rise buff as well. And with a lot of 4-cost comps getting heavily nerfed, this is one of the safest compositions to get a top 4 or even a top 1 if you're able to get this board at level 8 or even go level 9 and put in some sort of legendary. For our items in Janna, this is her best build. We want to focus on building a blue buff and other damage items. Her best damage items being Jeweled Gauntlet and Giant Slayer. Giant Slayer is just an incredible item at the end of this set. You could replace the blue buff with a Shojin, although to be honest with you, it's a lot worse. If you're able to get a blue buff, this is the item that you want on Janna. And you could use other AP damage items, things like Nashor's Tooth, Rabadon's, in case you need to be more flexible with the item. Kobuko is a little more interesting. The build that we have here is assuming that we're gonna get the power-up Best Defense, which even though that power-up got nerfed, it's still probably his best power-up. Best Defense essentially increases his damage every time that he gains a shield, which is why we're building items like Protector's Vow and Sterak's Gauge, which gives him shields throughout combat. But if you don't get this power-up, in that case, you could build more generic defensive items, things like Warmog's Armor, Spirit Visage, etc. Rise got a significant damage buff in this patch, but he's still not the main carry of this composition. So you're generally going to use him as a secondary source of damage or as a utility champion. I would say that probably his best item is Void Staff to reduce MR so that Janna could deal more damage, but pretty much if you have more AP items, you could just throw them onto him. And if you have more defensive items, you could just throw them onto Cassante as well. Regarding power-ups, in Janna, we want Veteran. That's pretty much the only power-up that we want to play on her, so it's probably not even worth mentioning any other power-ups. And on Kobuko, we generally want Best Defense, but if you're not able to hit it after doing the removers on Janna, other good options can be Body Change, Inner Fire, pretty much anything that gives him extra HP or an extra shield. In regards to augments, we want to focus on item augments in order to get perfect items on these units. Econ augments are great as well, so that you're able to get these 2 units to 3-star ASAP and start pushing levels afterwards. And combat augments are great as well, so you can start winning fights, although they're pretty much a little bit weaker compared to the other 2 augment types. So this is pretty much a new channel, but if you want to support the content, don't forget to subscribe, drop a like so that the YouTube algorithm pushes this to more tacticians, and let's continue with more OP comps. The next comp we're going to go over is Bastion Reroll. Now there's a couple of ways to play this composition, but this is pretty much the most optimum way to play the comp. Now this composition is mainly a frying pan comp, as it becomes a lot stronger with Bastion Emblem, specifically on Yasuo. Our main goal with this composition is to reroll at level 7 for our 3-cost units, being Swain, Yasuo, and Kog'Maw. Now, the great thing about this composition is that it's a hybrid damage comp, where we're going to build damage items on Yasuo and on Kog'Maw. Yasuo got a pretty good buff in this patch as well with his new power-up Wind Wall. Wind Wall increases his crit chance, and it also reduces damage from units that aren't adjacent to Yasuo. Coupling this with the Bastion trait makes Yasuo surprisingly tanky and incredible with crit items. So the build that we want to build on Yasuo is Bastion Emblem, IE, and Striker's Flail. I've seen this composition played without the Bastion Emblem, but to be honest with you, it's a lot weaker. Either way, don't discard the option if you have a really good opener like a Swain opener or a Kog'Maw opener. Just in that case, you really want to roll for the 6 Bastion units and your board becomes a little bit weak. On Kog'Maw, his best build is still Ginzo's, Shojin, and Archangel Staff, and Kog'Maw is still busted with a ton of artifacts. Artifacts like Dawn Core, Wit's End, Static Shiv, and Flicker Blade are still busted on Kog'Maw. So if you have Portable Forge as one of your first augments, it's still really good in this comp. The rest of our board is pretty self-explanatory. We want to get to 6 Bastion in order to have a really good buff on our resistances, and the Bastion Evelyn has a passive where the holder gains 15% 50% of the armor as attack damage, which really buffs Yasuo's overall damage. So I've seen a lot of people prioritize damage items on this comp since you already have a pretty solid front line with the resistances that Bastion gives you. So you want to focus on items on these two champions, but if you have defensive items, you pretty much want to focus on items that give you a lot of max HP to take advantage of the resistances. So things like Warmog's Armor, Sunfire Cape, Spirit Visage is really good, or things like Bramble Vest or Dragon's Claw. In regards to power-ups, the best power-ups for Yasuo, first we have Wind Wall, his new power-up that's completely busted, but if we're not able to hit that, we can use some scaling power-ups like Weights or Not Done Yet, or Hemorrhage is really good on him as well. On Kog'Maw, his best power-ups are Caretaker and Fairy Tail, and if you don't hit the Bastion emblem, you could still play this composition focusing on Kog'Maw and Swain. In that case, we'd want to put a defensive power-up on Swain, something like Body Change, Tankzilla, or even Standalone or Corrosive are really good on him. The next reroll composition in this video is Katarina Reroll. This composition is also a level 6 reroll comp, so we want to stay at level 6 until we hit Katarina 3-star and Rakan 3-star. The main thing that makes this composition so strong is scaling power-ups on Katarina. Things like over 9,000, Not Done Yet, Weights, and Max Arcana are insane on her. Generally, the items we want to place on Katarina are these three items, which are Edge of Night, Gnasher's Tooth, and Hand of Justice. Since we're going to activate the Executioner trait, Katarina's ability can already critically strike, so she's going to get a lot of mana generation from that Gnasher's Tooth. Rakan is going to be our main tank on this composition, so the best items for Rakan are Ionic Spark, which got buffed on this patch and reduces MR, so that Katarina could deal a lot more damage. Other defensive items such as Gargoyle Stoneplate or Spirit Visage are really good on him, but the items are really general. You could put things like Warmog, Steadfast Heart, pretty much any defensive item that you get. If you get any extra AP items, you can also itemize Yuumi in this composition, although I would say that her best item is probably Morellonomicon, just because it's really hard to get extra AP items, and this is going to give the comp a little bit of utility to reduce healing on the enemy's board. In regards to power-ups, we already went over Katarina's power-ups, but in Rakan, we want pretty much any defensive power-up. Things like Unstoppable, Body Change, all that's really good on him. Inner Fire, Resistant. And regarding augments, the best augments for this composition, like always, is extra items in order to get perfect items on Katarina, especially if we're able to get Radiant items on her. The comp gets really nuts. After that, we want Econ items so that we could get these champions to 3-star and start pushing levels, and we finish up with combat. The last reroll comp that we're going to go over on this video is Heavyweight Malzahar. Now this composition has gotten a few nerfs over the last few patches, but a new power-up came out for Malzahar, Innoxious Trap, that's incredible utility-wise and allows you to build a full damage Malzahar. Now this composition is a level 7 reroll comp, where we want to get Malzahar, Darius, and Jace to 3-star. Although the main unit that we're going to focus on here is Malzahar, and if we're able to get one of those two other units, Darius or Jace, to 3-star, it makes the comp a lot stronger. In Malzahar, this is his best build. We're going to build blue buff so that he spams his ult and gets that ability on all of the enemy's units. The other two items that we want on him are Jeweled Gauntlet and Rabadon's Death Cap. Now, generally, we build Malzahar with MR Shred and Anti-Heal, but the new power-up Noxious Trap does this for us. This power-up makes Malzahar's ability Burn, Wound, Shred, and Sunder. And since his ability pretty much hits the entire enemy board, you don't have to worry about shredding any resistances or building any Anti-Heal, which is also great for our secondary damage dealers in Darius and Jace. If we get a ton of AD damage items, we generally want to build things like Sterax, Bloodthirster, or Titans on these champions. Darius can also get away with being a full damage champion at 3-star thanks to the HP that Heavyweight is giving. So you could also itemize him with things like IE, Giant Slayer, and Hand of Justice, although I feel like it's a little bit risky. And in this patch, BT got buffed, so that should be enough damage. Generally, Malzahar is our main damage dealer, so we don't really need much more than that. Our main tank in this composition is Poppy. Again, there are two ways to build her. There's this generic tank build with things like Gargoyle Stoneplate, Spirit Visage, Warmog's Armor, Bramble Vest, Dragon's Claw, depending on the lobby. But like Kobuko, Best Defense is still a really solid power-up on her. So if you're able to hit Best Defense, you generally want these items, Sterax Gauge, Protector's Vow, and Crown Guard. But if you don't hit this power-up, you could use other defensive power-up. Things like Body Change and Unstoppable are really good. In regards to augments, I feel like it's pretty much a rule across this set. Item augments are generally really good, as it gives you a pretty big advantage above your enemies if you have more items than they do, and it lets you hit BIS on a lot of these units. units. After that, we want to start pushing levels to get more units on our board. We could do things like add more Prodigy or add more legendary units like Twisted Fate or Zyra in the late game. And we'll finish up with combat augments, although they're not that prioritized. Now, the first 4-cost fast 8 comp we're going to go over is Akali Executioners. Akali did get a small damage nerf in this patch, but due to the fact that she could just focus backlines if your opponents aren't positioned correctly, she's still a really strong comp. Our main goal with this comp is to get to level 8 as fast as possible and focus on 4-cost units. The main ones being Akali, Jarvan, and Ryze. Regarding items, Akali pretty much wants this build always, which is double Nashor's Tooth and Quicksilver. Now, Quicksilver can be replaced with Hand of Justice, but it's not that reliable since we do want that passive to gain immunity to crowd control, so that Akali could just focus the backline and knock out the enemy's carry. If you've been living under the rock and don't know this interaction, the reason why we want double Nashor's Tooth on Akali is because thanks to Executioner, Akali is almost always going to deal critical damage, which is going to generate a ton of mana for her, making her ult after landing 2 basic attacks, which means that this comp is really strong with additional item augments or with things like Pandora's item. Our main tank in this composition is going to be Jarvan. On Jarvan, we could build any generic defensive item on him, although his best item is Protector's Vow, since this is going to give him starting mana. If you do have Pandora's items, triple Protector's Vow is probably his most OP build, so that he could start combat ulting as soon as possible. This comp also got a bit stronger thanks to the damage buff on Ryze, although he's going to be the secondary carry in this comp. But if we have extra AP items, things like Void Staff in order to reduce MR so Akali could deal more damage is excellent on him. Archangel Staff is probably his best item, and if we want a little more utility on him, Morellonomicon is great so that he could start burning the tanks. In regards to power-ups, the best power-up for Akali is Crimson Veil to give her a little bit of healing. If for some reason we're not able to hit Crimson Veil, then Dark Amulet and Thrill Seeker are really good secondary options on her. And on Jarvan, we want things like Tankzilla, Body Change, Unstoppable, pretty much anything that gives him extra HP. For augments, we want to prioritize augments that give us extra items like we mentioned earlier in order to get BIS Akali. We also want econ augments in order to get to level 8 as fast as possible and get our board to 2-star. And finally, we want combat augments. Our next comp is Vertical Soul Fighter. Even though this comp got nerfed a bit, it's still a very stable comp, especially if you get a Soul Fighter +1 at the beginning of the game, or you have a 4 Soul Fighter opener. The comp did get a small nerf to 6 or 8 Soul Fighter, but this is still one of the best openers to get a full win streak. And if you're able to hit Gwen 2-star, it's still a really good comp to secure a top 4 or even a top 1 if you're able to 2-star your entire board. Being a fast 8 comp, we do want to get to level 8 as fast as possible and get 2-star Samira and Set. On Samira, her best items are Spear of Shojin in order to get her stacks off as quickly as possible, IE, and Giant Slayer. And Set is pretty much good with any generic defensive items, things like Gargoyle Stoneplate, Spirit Visage, and Warmog are excellent on him. Now here we do have items on Volibear, although this isn't really a priority. This is pretty much if we do have extra items or if we have a Soul Fighter +1. Volibear with 8 Soul Fighter is pretty crazy. So if you're able to get this spatula off on him, you want things like BT or Sterix Gauge. If we do have extra AP items, we do want to itemize Gwen in the late game. Gwen's ult hits the entire enemy board, so she's really good with things like Void Staff to reduce MR, Morellonomicon to apply that wound, and Edge of Night so she doesn't die too quickly in combat. You could use Lux as an item holder for Gwen. As soon as you get to level 8 or level 9 and hit that 1-star Gwen, you're going to pass those items over to her and she's going to get really insane to help you close out endgame fights. In regards to power-ups, on Samira, we want power-ups to increase her damage. So things like On the Edge, Sky Piercer, or Shadow Clone are really great on her. And sets, we want defensive power-ups like Tankzilla, Body Change, and Resistant. In regards to augments, we want augments that give us extra items since there's so many units that we can itemize here, especially if you're able to get a spatula off. This makes it really easy to hit 8 Soul Fighter and even go for that prismatic trait. Aside from that, we want econ augments since this comp gets really strong once we hit Gwen 2-star. We want to get to level 8, hit Samira and Set at 2-star, and then push levels to level 9 so we could finish off the game with a Gwen 2-star and possibly even a Braum in late game in order to activate Luchador with Volibear if we have that +1 Soul Fighter. We round out the augments with combat augments, especially those Soul Fighter augments are really strong. Vertical Mighty Mech also got an adjustment in this patch and is one of the best fast 8, fast 9 comps in the game. The main thing they did to Mighty Mech is that they did nerf the power level of 7 Mighty Mech, but they did buff 5 Mighty Mech. So your mid game becomes a lot stronger than it was in the previous patch, which should allow you to stabilize at level 8, push to level 9, hit that Yone, and have a really strong end game board. So our main goal in this comp is to get to level 8 as fast as possible, play around Karma and Jarvan 2-star, from there push to level 9 and look for a Yone 2-star. So on Karma, this is probably her best build. Blue buff, Jeweled Gauntlet, and Void Staff. This is going to allow her to explode front lines and deal secondary damage with her Sorcerer trait. On Jarvan, like we mentioned on the Akali comp, his best item is Protector's Vow to give him that starting mana, but other items that give him additional HP, like Sunfire Cape and Warmog, are incredible on him. If you're able to get AD items, Yone's best build is Bloodthirster, which was buffed this patch, Edge of Night, and Titan's Resolve, although he's also good with other generic AD items like Giant Slayer or Quicksilver. You're generally going to use Volibear or Gangplank as an item holder for Yone, although it's generally Gangplank, which got a small buff this patch as well. Since Volibear, we're going to put him in at level 8, level 9, once we hit that Yone to activate 2 Edgelord. In regards to power-ups, there's 2 main ways to play this composition. The first one is getting power-ups on Karma and Jarvan. In Karma, her best power-ups are things that reduces her mana cost or gives her more damage, things like Mage, Efficient, etc. On Jarvan, any defensive power-up is good on him, although probably the best way to play this composition is to look for the Mech Pilot power-up on Lucian and on Senna. This is going to give the Mighty Mech additional stats, and more importantly, once you hit 2 Mech Pilot, it's going to give him additional traits. So getting the Sorcerer trait, allowing the Mighty Mech to deal additional damage once he starts killing units, and the Executioner trait, allowing his ult to deal critical damage, is probably one of the best things that we could do for late game 7 Mighty Mech. This also allows us to give additional items to these champions to give extra damage to the Mighty Mech. The best items I've seen are Deathblade to give him more AD or Warmogs to give him more HP, but probably the most busted thing you could do is give him extra trait. If you're in a portal or have some sort of augment that gives you things like Duelist Emblem or a Juggernaut Emblem or a Heavyweight Emblem, giving these traits to the Mighty Mech is one of the strongest things you could do in late game. If we want to go through this route, we really want to play around 7 Mighty Mech. The bad thing about this is that it's tied behind hitting a Yone. So this comp is really like a fast 9 comp. So we want to get a really good win streak in early game playing around a Mighty Mech opener. This is going to allow us to get to level 8 quickly, hit these 2-star units, or at least one of them 2-star, then going to level 9 and hitting that Yone. Due to this, we want to focus on econ augments for this composition. After that, we want to go with extra items to put extra items on the Mighty Mech or to hit base on these units. And lastly, we have those comment augments. Now, even though this composition got nerfed, Star Guardian, Jinx, and Poppy is still a really strong comp, especially with a strong open. The main goal with this composition is to go fast 8 and play around Jinx and Poppy. Although I've seen that this level 9 board is the best performing Star Guardian board, so I even like to think of this comp as a fast 9 comp playing around a really strong opener with AD items. On Jinx, her best items are Shojin, IE, and Giant Slayer. Poppy, like the other best defense users, her best items are Crown Guard, Protector's Vow, and Sterix if we're able to hit the best defense power-up. If you're not able to hit the best defense power-up, in that case, generic defensive items are good on her as well. Things like the items that we have on Cassante, Sunfire Cape, Even Shroud, and Warmog's Armor. Late game, we want to go to level 9 and hit that Varus 2-star. So if we're able to get items for Varus, they're really good on Jinx as well. Things like Blue Buff, Deathblade, and IE. Generally, our mid game, we're going to look for a 2-star Jinx and a 2-star Poppy. We're going to use Jinx as our primary carry and Varus as our secondary carry. Although the second you hit 2-star Varus, you probably want to use a remover on Jinx and put those items on Varus until you get extra damage items in the super late game off of carousels. Our late game front line is going to focus around Poppy, Braum, Cassante, and the other supporting units. So until we get to level 9, you can play vertical Star Guardian, playing around 6 Star Guardian, which is the typical way to play this composition. In regards to power-ups, Jinx got a new power-up on this patch on Super Mega, allowing her ult to deal AoE damage, so that's a really good option on her now. Gather Force did get nerfed, but it's still pretty good, and Sky Piercer is another option if we don't have armor penetration. On Poppy, her best power-up is best defense, but if we're not able to hit this, things like Corrosive, Tankzilla, Unstoppable, all of those are really good options. In regards to augments that give us additional items are always good, especially with the amount of units we can itemize on this comp. Econ augments are great as well, since we do want to get to level 9 to build this board, and combat augments come in last.